Hello friends, Big Stupid Grin here, back with another State of the Investigator video, this time for Sefina Rousseau, everybody's favorite painting forger. This is the August 2019 edition. Important to note, the Circle Undone just got finished, and we haven't seen too many cards for the Dream Eaters Deluxe expansion, and Return to Carcosa's player cards have been spoiled, so that's the point in time in which we are looking at Sefina Rousseau. I give her stats a C+, and before you might get annoyed at that, I'm looking at the stats in a vacuum and not considering her card pool. So she has 4s in the traditionally considered defensive stats, willpower and agility. You do need setup time to make those proactive stats, of course. Namely, the willpower and card pool leads you to spells at the beginning of the game. 5 health is very scary and makes Sefina very, very fragile. In some expansions, you're going to see encounter cards that just straight up deal damage to you, unpreventable damage. Maybe not direct damage, but still Sefina can get killed off very, very easily. I give her Elder Sign an A, one of the best Elder Signs in the game. A +3 bonus is nothing to scoff at, and that bonus ability is very, very nice. And it works regardless of passing the Chaos Bag test, although it'd be pretty hard to fail a test when you pull a +3 token. I give her ability an A+, it's amazing. You get to draw 13 cards in your opening hand. You do have to choose up to 5 events in your opening draw. Place under Sefina's card, keep to the side, discard back down to 8 cards if necessary. So you want to draw at least 5 events. So a typical Sefina Rousseau deck runs plenty of events, around 18 or more. Take a look at ArkhamDB if you want to see some Sefina Rousseau decks. And then you can spend an action to draw an event that is underneath Sefina's card, which is pretty good. I'm going to, before we look more at her ability, I want to take a look at her signature cards because they synergize so well with her ability. She has 3 copies of the Painted World. It is an event. It has willpower and agility and a wild icon. It plays as an exact copy of a non-exceptional event beneath Sefina Rousseau. So the cost is variable, the effect obviously is variable, and you have to remove the Painted World from the game instead of discarding it. Yeah, with her ability, that's insane. And it's with her amazing card draw, it's very easy to play this a couple of times every single scenario. Her weakness is Stars of Hades. Whenever you draw it, you have to randomly choose an event beneath Sefina Rousseau and remove it from the game. If you cannot take damage in a horror, if your deck has more than 5 cards, or 5 or more cards in it, you shuffle Stars of Hades back into your deck instead of discarding it. In practice, this hasn't done too much damage to me. Of course, in theory, you can always discard an event you're really counting on, but that's why you use her ability to draw it if you're worried about Stars of Hades taking something important. I've never taken a damage in a horror off of Stars of Hades. Usually you keep most of your events underneath Sefina to copy with a Painted World. Again, she has arguably the second best start in the game, in my opinion, with that massive card draw. I think Ashcan Pete probably has the best start in the game because he just comes out with Duke. And Daisy, Mark, and Norman, and Mindy, I think, is the Dream Eater's Seeker. I would give them second tier starts just because they have 5s in their important skills, so they need a lot less setup. So you get to see 36% of your opening hand, which is amazing. So looking into the probabilities, I looked up a site called the Pearl Card Calculator. Let's say you had a card that you must draw in your opening hand. You put 2 copies of them in your deck, and you have 36 non-weakness cards in the deck. I haven't shown you the card pool just yet, but that's what you have. You have nearly 60% chance of drawing at least one of those important cards. Now, that's not that's about 5% better than somebody playing with a normal deck that mulligans everything. So they look at 10 cards. But hard mulliganing is really difficult for me in this game. There's so many important cards to get and keep that it's really hard for me to toss back all 5. Normally you're going to draw an ally or an asset that you need to put out. So I've never gone the hard mulligan route with a normal, typical investigator. You can dictate when to use those situational events, so they make Sefina makes events substantially better. And also, that 13 card hand size makes tarot cards amazing for Sefina, as if you draw a tarot card in your opening hand, you get to put it out for free. I give her card pool a B+ at the 0 XP mark and an A+ at the 1 to 5 XP mark. So she starts as a hybrid spellcaster evader. She has access to rogue cards level 0 to 5, neutral cards 0 to 5, and mystic cards 0 to 2. So with that high willpower, she kind of starts with spells to do most of her tasks, as well as her events, obviously. And then more experience points her towards either a tarot card strategy or resource-heavy strategy. And she has access to the overpowered adaptable, so you can really change from one strategy to the next without too much expenditure of experience. To solve her low health, I would really recommend painkillers. So the card painkillers and the card smoking pipe, which is the opposite of painkillers. So painkillers, you take a horror to heal a damage. Remember, you can put that horror or damage, if we're talking about smoking pipe, on an asset if you want to. Anybody who has a 5 and a 9 or a 9 and a 5 in their horror damage pools, I like to consider painkillers or smoking pipe, whatever's the most appropriate. David Renfield is a great damage soak for cheap, and at the 0 XP level, Sefina Rousseau is going to be reliant on spells a lot, so putting a Doom on him to get the extra willpower is really nice, and of course getting the resources is a great side effect to that. You can consider some options in her body slot. Trenchcoat is a little expensive, but getting +1 during evasion tests is really nice. That gets that stat all the way up to a 5, and this can tank 2 damage for you. Fine Clothes is a great situational card, and since we have access to Adaptable, that makes Fine Clothes even better. You can take a damage for you, and it reduces skill tests for parlay actions by 2. So if you know the scenario you're walking into, Fine Clothes could be one of your most valuable cards. Later, you can consider the Bulletproof Vest. I'm amazed that I'm recommending Bulletproof Vest or the Elder Sign Amulet, which I'm not recommending for her, but the Bulletproof Vest is interesting because it does take almost as much damage as Sefina takes alone. So it is an option, but you have so many other options for experience points that I'm going to recommend playing around with everything. As far as horror soak / healing, you've got the Rosary, which you want to play anyway at the beginning for the extra willpower. You can tank a couple of horror. That isn't a huge deal with Sefina, but again, like I said, with painkillers, you can offload that horror to the Rosary if you want. Liquid Courage is really, really good with her, even though, again, she has that high sanity pool. You can spend a supply, so you heal a horror and you test willpower 2 to heal another horror. Being 2 up is often a, between a 70, 75, and 80% chance to succeed based on your difficulty. So, of course, you can always draw a bad token, a -3 or a -4 or the auto-fail to lose a card, but most of the time you're going to be healing 2 horror with this card if you're using it on yourself. Plus, Sefina, some of her best cards are going to be stashed underneath her player card with her ability. So it's not quite as bad, but discarding a card at random. You're definitely going to be reliant on spells in the early game. Sixth Sense is fantastic for her. Just lets her investigate at a 4, and probably a 5 if you're running Renfield and or Holy Rosary. Rite of Seeking is pretty good in multiplayer. Losing your turn is pretty bad though, but it's probably something you're going to run. And then as far as testless clue gathering goes, she has the awesome Intel Report and Drawn to the Flame. She is above average at dealing with the encounter deck, so Drawn to the Flame's drawback is a little less in a Rousseau deck. Intel Report, especially if Rousseau uses that rogue pool to gain a lot of resources, is fantastic. And even if you use it as a slower version of Working a Hunch, the card is still pretty good. If you do encounter a Intellect encounter card, which is a bummer with Sefina, at least this has 2 icons. You're probably not going to be ditching this for the 2 Intellect icons, however. On the fighting side, we have Wither and Shriveling. Shriveling being a lot more preferable to Wither, but Wither at least gives your deck some amount of consistency on the damage side of things. As far as one-time events, which again can be multiple-time events thanks to Painted World, we've got Backstab and Storm of Spirits. The Dream Eaters Deluxe expansion is going to throw swarms of enemies at us, so Storm of Spirits is only going to get better in that case. And Backstab is a great way of dealing a lot of damage at once, as long as you can pump up that agility skill. Small Favor is the damage equivalent to Intel Report, and can deal 2 damage without a test. So that's pretty impactful. Sneak Attack isn't the best card in the world, but with Sefina, it's pretty good. She can evade at a 4 or 5 if you're using Trenchcoat, or more if you're using other card, skill cards or what have you. And dealing 2 damage a few times with Painted World isn't the worst thing in the world. As far as allies go, if you're willing to spend experience, Lola Santiago is one of the best, if not the best, ally that costs experience in the game, or high experience ally. She tanks some damage and horror for you. If you really want to run lockpicks, Lola's pretty good for that as well. And if you have a great economy, which is easy to do in Rogue, she can handle all of the clue, almost all of the clue ring for you. And a Kazlo, of course, with the Tarot strategy, really easy to draw her. And if you do, you put her into play immediately, and you get a couple of at least 1 Tarot asset and put that into play, but hopefully more than 1, since again 13 card hand size. Now Leo doesn't cost experience unless you want to reduce his resource cost to 5, but I'm putting him here because again he's an ally you can just put down and let him work every single turn, so it is a late campaign ally choice. Sefina is especially favorable to run tarot cards with. The 4 of Cups and the Moon help your primary stats. Not too much to talk about there. The Ace of Rods, I'm not sure if that's a great card, but it's okay, I suppose. As far as upgrading events, I'm just going to present you with the list and tell you to knock yourselves out. There are plenty of great choices in this list of rogue events with more than 1 experience point. If you have Tabletop Simulator or Octagon, go ahead and go wild. Play a scenario a few times with different choices. And really, Sefina is about evaluating those event cards and see what works best for you. And of course, as far as the Mystic side goes, you have a couple of interesting options from the 0 to 2 XP pool. Of course, she has access to Ward of Protection and Deny Existence. I think Deny Existence is incredibly important for her since it cancels out damage taken. So you almost want to save Deny Existence for that. And I would recommend running 2 copies of Deny Existence. As far as late game high experience point assets go, Suggestion is insane for Sefina. You get to evade at an 8, and that's before you consider tarot cards. And if you succeed, it's really easy to succeed by at least 2, so you won't be using charges all of the time. Also, spending a charge to cancel a big attack is fantastic. Double Double is it's not quite as good a suggestion. It's very interesting. It's exceptional, so it costs 8 experience points. You can only run one of them, although again, Sefina has a decent chance of drawing it, 36%. And after you play an event, you can exhaust Double Double to play it again as if it were in your hand. You do have to pay the experience cost again, or the resource cost again, but you get to double it up. I rated this pretty highly on my card review, but the fact that you have to pay the resource cost gives me a little bit of pause in judgment. I need to test this card a little bit and see how well it works. Maybe play some standalone scenarios with it. So, Sefina Rousseau, solo and multiplayer. She can do both. She has a good enough card pool to play the generalist role, and you'll be playing a generalist probably no matter you're in solo or in multiplayer. Plenty of test-free stuff, which is what I value highly in solo play. Adaptable, again, it's good in solo multiplayer, but especially important for solo play, because you can either tweak your deck towards an upcoming scenario or build with your new upgrades that you buy. Because your deck's focus can change quite a bit once you buy cards with Sefina Rousseau. And of course, she's still very fragile, so you have to watch out for that. And that is something that can happen to you at true solo at any time, pretty much. Multiplayer, I love to pair her with a fighter who can grab clues on their own, like Roland Banks, Joe Diamond, and Ashcan Pete. She's great with other people, but that's just who I kind of thought off the top of my head. People who can protect Sefina and let her get set up. Not that she needs a lot of setup time like a traditional Mystic would, because she does draw those 13 cards. And then she can just play with them, have Roland, Joe, or Ashcan fight the enemies for her, and then pull off the tricksy, galaxy brain kind of plays. So why play Sefina? Sefina's, I think it's informative for your progression as a player because it lets you look at unconventional deck building and card evaluations. You run a ton of events with her to help her become consistent with that opening draw. And events need to be evaluated differently when you can play them a few times with Painted World. I would watch out for analysis paralysis. She has a lot of options she can go towards with experience purchasing and just making the 0 XP deck as well. If you just want to learn Sefina, I would recommend going on ArkhamDB and just picking a deck that looks good and playing that with, you can change it up a little bit. She has a high skill ceiling because of that, but she's also not too difficult to play. She kind of, plays herself. Basically, the only skill things would be when do you want to draw an event underneath your card, mainly to protect it against the Stars of Hades. And if you have a card that's very situational, but you want to make sure you have it on hand, like a Ward of Protection or Deny Existence, I would consider drawing that card as well. But of course, you're spending actions, so you're spending tempo, so you have to evaluate that as well. Anyway, that's my look at Sefina Rousseau. I really think she's a top-tier investigator, and she's from Path to Carcosa, so chances are you might have her. If you haven't played her yet, I really highly recommend you do. Anyway, a big stupid grin. Hope you enjoyed your time here, and until next time, have a good one.